Macbeth, a literary work by William Shakespeare. Macbeth is a very moving tragedy. It transports the reader to a medieval era, and more precisely to Scotland, probably written between the years 1599 and 1606. It consists of 5 acts. Building on its success, this literary work is still relevant, and its study is edifying for young high school students, full of writing skills and moral values. His teaching is part of the high school curriculum. If you have not yet had the opportunity to read it, we offer you here a complete summary of each act. The Prophecy of the Witches. Scene 1. It all starts with witches planning to meet Macbeth before sunset on the moor. Scene 2. Following the war between the armies of King Duncan and their allies in Ireland and the enemies of Norway, a wounded captain denounced the betrayal of Cotter's Thane. It also testifies to the heroism of Macbeth, cousin of the king, who thanks to his courage and the support of his friend Banquo managed to defeat the enemy. It was on these feats that King Duncan decided to execute Cotter and confer his title on the valiant Macbeth. Scene 3. The 3 witches appear before Macbeth and Banquo. They tell Macbeth that he has already received the title of Thane of Cotter and that he will be enthroned King of Scotland. Banquo is also asking for his future to be revealed. The witches disappeared after telling him that he would not accede to the throne, but that one of his descendants will be the future king. This strange appearance left them incredulous, and they were joined by the Thane of Ross, who informed them of Macbeth's promotion to the title of Thane of the Cotter. Scene 4. King Duncan greets Macbeth and Banquo with his thanks. He also appointed his eldest son Malcolm as his future successor to the crown. He announced his intention to come and spend the night in Macbeth's castle, confronting the king's designs and the witch's prophecy. Macbeth is troubled. He decides to write a letter to his wife informing her of his entire story. Scene 5. In Inverness, Lady Macbeth learns about the details of the witch's prophecy. Filled with ambition and greed, she decides to convince her husband to take his destiny into his own hands. To do this, she hatches a plan to assassinate the king during his stay at the castle. Macbeth arrives at the castle and tries to convince him to assassinate King Duncan. Scene 6. The king arrives at Macbeth Castle accompanied by his subjects. Lady Macbeth went to meet him and paid him her respects. The king thanked her for her hospitality and wished to meet her valiant host. Assassination. Scene 1. On the night of the heinous crime, Macbeth is plagued by hallucinations. Scene 2. The plan is underway. Lady Macbeth poisons all the guards. For his part, Macbeth had just committed the crime of regicide by killing the king. Lady Macbeth then scolds the king's blood on the servants in order to make them bear the blame for the crime. Scene 3. The day after the assassination, Lennox and Macduff discovered King Duncan's lifeless body. Macbeth and his wife deceived the vigilance of the king's other subjects. Frightened, Malcolm and Donalbain took refuge in England and Ireland respectively. King Duncan's 2 sons were suspected of being behind their father's death. Scene 4. Ross arrives at the crime scene with an old man to further analyze the situation. They learned that Macbeth would be enthroned king, for no one had more legitimacy to accede to the throne of Scotland than he did. The new king. Scene 1. Macbeth is invested king. However, he has not forgotten the prophecy announced at Banquo. The fear of seeing it come true further galvanized him in his murderous actions. From then on, he ordered the assassination of Banquo and his son. Scene 2. The new queen monitored her husband's actions, which she considered reluctant to exercise his power. The latter defends himself by showing him that he has already ordered the assassination of Banquo and his son. Scene 3. Banquo saves his son and is killed by the king's henchmen. Scene 4. Stressed by the fulfillment of the prophecy, Macbeth organizes festivities. At this party, the ghost of his former partner appears to him. Confused, he began to rant of delusional words. In view of this incomprehensible spectacle, Lady Macbeth tried to confuse the guests and pretended a temporary delirium of the king. Aware that the situation is spiraling out of control, Macbeth decides to return to meet the 3 witches in order to find a way out. Scene 5. The witches meet again to discuss Macbeth's turn of fate. They herald a sinister end for Macbeth. Scene 6. Macbeth rules Scotland as a perfect tyrant. His actions raise in the minds of certain subjects the question of the true identity of the murderer of the king. Lennox discusses the matter with another Thane. They also learn of the king's reprisals against Macbeth because of his absence from the last festivities organized by the sovereign. Overwhelmed by the horrors of Macbeth's dictatorship, Macduff met King Edward to seek his help in overthrowing the tyrant of Scotland. The New Prophecy. Scene 1. Macbeth invokes witches. The oracle foretold him that no man born of a woman could defeat him, and that he would run no risk of falling until the Burmese forest had marched towards Dunsinane Hill. Blinded by his desire for absolute supremacy, King Macbeth felt more comforted. Scene 2. To erase any risk of decay, Macbeth decided to eliminate Macduff's companion, his son, and his family. Faced with condemnation, Lady Macbeth curses her husband for his irresponsibility. Young Macduff, on the other hand, found only pure heroism in his father's actions. They were executed. Scene 3. As a refugee in England, Macduff felt a deep desire for justice after the murder of his family. He, therefore, decided to ally with Malcolm to overthrow the king. Funded by Scottish aristocrats and supported by the Earl of Northumberland and his son Seward, Malcolm raised a large army to dethrone the regicide Macbeth. The fall of the king. Scene 1. Traumatized by guilt, Lady Macbeth lost control of her faculties and sank into dementia. In her hallucinations, she was bathed in the blood of her victims. She eventually committed suicide. Scene 2. Macbeth was deserted in his camp, and many nobles joined the English forces to overthrow him from the throne. Scene 3. Macbeth sinks into despair. However, remembering the prophecy of the three witches, he engaged in the war against Malcolm, Macduff, and Seward. Scene 4. British forces cut tree branches in the Burmese forest to make them camouflage tools in their march to Dunsinane. Scene 5. Lonely following the death of Lady Macbeth, the tyrant does not waver. He convinces himself that the oracle has deceived him and that he is still able to win the battle. Scene 6. The fighting is on. Scene 7. Macbeth defies all warriors. He confronts young Seward and kills him. Scene 8. Macbeth confronts Macduff. He learns that Macduff was not born from a mother's womb because his gestation was interrupted prematurely. Troubled by this revelation, Macduff struggled as best he could, but was beheaded by his opponent. Scene 9. Macbeth's head is presented on a pike to the new King Malcolm. The latter returned to the throne and perpetuated his father's will by restoring a right and just governance. And finally, if you have any book or film you want to summary it, please let us a comment and don't forget to subscribe and like the video.